In June of 2026, the United States executed a 36-hour global airstrike operation that put 125 aircraft over Iranian nuclear facilities. 7 of them were B-2 stealth bombers, flying out of Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, refueling in midair, hitting their targets, and coming home. It was a textbook demonstration of penetrating long-range strike. It was also, quietly, a problem. The United States only has 19 operational B-2s. The bomber that carried the most demanding piece of the most demanding strike of the year is 40 years old in design, hand-built in numbers small enough to count on 3 pairs of hands, and aging out of relevance against the air defense networks being fielded right now in the Pacific. But the real story is not the B-2. The real story is the aircraft being built behind a security fence in Palmdale, California. The production rate that just expanded by 25%, the contractor that just absorbed $2 billion in losses to scale that line, and the strategic recalculation that production push is forcing on every Pentagon plan for a war in the Western Pacific. This is the B-21 Raider production push, the largest long-range strike industrial mobilization the United States has undertaken in 40 years. Welcome back to the channel. 3 things to track. First, the math. Ranges, payloads, fleet sizes, dollars. Second, the geometry. What a B-21 fleet at scale does to a Pacific war, the B-2 cannot. Third, the cost of the bet. The risks Northrop has absorbed, the budget squeeze inside the nuclear triad, and the historical pattern that has truncated every American bomber program since the B-1. 92% of the United States Air Force's combat air forces are short-legged tactical fighters. Their unrefueled mission radius is roughly 650 to 700 nautical miles. To put a fighter over a target inside China, the Air Force needs basing inside the first island chain, and aerial tankers airborne behind that basing to keep those fighters fueled. Both requirements have been targeted. The People's Liberation Army Rocket Force fields the DF-26 with reach beyond Guam, and the DF-21D carrier killer that holds American naval assets at risk. Forward bases sit within cratering distance of Chinese ballistic missiles. Tankers, fragile, predictable, fuel-laden orbital nodes, are exactly what an anti-access network is built to remove. China has hardened its reclaimed reefs in the South China Sea with HQ-9 surface-to-air missile sites, creating overlapping coverage designed to hold a non-stealth strike force at risk before it reaches the coast. Those are the bubbles a 6th-generation bomber is built to pierce. From Andersen Air Force Base on Guam, a B-21 transit to Nanjing is roughly 1,800 nautical miles. To Beijing, 2,200. To contested zones in the South China Sea, between 1,600 and 1,900. If Guam is suppressed by a ballistic missile barrage, the next basing option is Naval Support Facility Diego Garcia. From Diego Garcia, the South China Sea is 2,600 to 3,000 nautical miles. Inland targets like Chengdu, 2,900. The B-21's combat radius is estimated above 3,000 nautical miles. Unrefueled. That single number is the problem statement. Air Force Plant 42 in Palmdale, California, is where it gets built. Northrop Grumman has invested more than $5 billion of its own capital into digital tooling, robotic assembly, and infrastructure expansion. The integrated assembly line concept, refined for the F-35 center fuselage, was scaled up. Augmented reality systems let technicians visualize assemblies before installation. The digital twin ecosystem cuts software certification time in half. New assembly halls cover nearly 1 million square feet. 2 test aircraft are flying. Tail number 0001, sometimes called Cerberus, first flew on November 10, 2023, then relocated to Edwards Air Force Base. Tail number 0002 flew in September of 2025. The Air Force expects at least 4 more pre-production aircraft in various stages of test. The pace at Edwards is not normal. In May of 2026, Northrop Grumman compressed a planned 180-day developmental flight test schedule into 73 days, securing an $11.8 billion contract milestone. On April 14th of 2026, the program completed extensive aerial refueling trials with a KC-135 Stratotanker, with test pilots reporting exceptional handling stability. The subcontractors are named. Pratt & Whitney builds the engines, an F-135 derivative. BAE Systems builds the mission systems and electronic warfare suite. Collins Aerospace builds integrated avionics and flight controls. Spirit Aerosystems and GKN Aerospace build aerostructures. Janicki Industries handles composite tooling. Tygitco builds composite assemblies in South Carolina. The system is anchored on an open architecture digital backbone. The Raider is built to upgrade. software refreshes plug in, hardware modules swap out. The airframe is designed to function not just as a strike platform, but as a penetrating ISR node, a battle management hub, and a quarterback for autonomous collaborative combat aircraft. On weapons, the Raider is dual-role. Conventionally, it carries Joint Direct Attack munitions, the AGM-158JASSMER cruise missile, and potentially the 30,000-pound GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator. In its strategic nuclear role, it carries the B-6112 and B-6113 variable yield gravity bombs, alongside the forthcoming AGM-181 long-range standoff cruise missile. In February of 2026, the Air Force and Northrop formalized a 25% expansion of annual production capacity, funded by a $4.5 billion appropriation under the FY 2025 reconciliation legislation, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. That moves the rate from 7 or 8 aircraft per year up to 10 or 11. The first 21 aircraft are under fixed-price LRIP Lot 1. Lot 3 is on contract. Advanced procurement for Lot 5 is moving. For the next 19 aircraft, Northrop and the government negotiated a not-to-exceed pricing framework, a vital off-ramp from the punishing early fixed-price economics. A B-21 fleet at scale does 4 specific things. First, it denies sanctuary. Inland Chinese military infrastructure, command nodes, missile garrisons, logistics hubs, has historically been treated as safe behind 1,000 kilometers of integrated air defenses. A penetrating bomber with a 3,000 nautical mile combat radius makes those targets reachable. That forces Beijing to disperse air defense assets internally, pulling them off the coast. The cost imposition is asymmetric. Second, it changes the basing equation. Unlike the B-2, which required specialized climate-controlled clamshell hangars, the B-21 is designed for austere basing. Recent bomber task force missions have practiced hot pit refueling at Royal Australian Air Force Base Amberley, CONUS basing anchors at Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota, the first operational base and formal training unit, followed by Whiteman in Missouri and Dias in Texas. Third, it pulls the budget. The conventional Air Force is tied to short-range fighters whose host bases are increasingly cratering targets. Outgoing Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall said it bluntly at a CSIS event in January 2025. Quote, "The Air Force is very heavily dependent on relatively short-range aircraft and has a relatively small inventory of longer-range strike platforms. I think that balance needs to shift." End quote. Fourth, it imposes a carrying cost on Northrop Grumman. Northrop took a $1.56 billion pre-tax charge in January 2024 and another $477 million charge in April 2025. CEO Kathy Warden was specific that the second charge was driven by a deliberate process change, a revamp of robotic tooling and facility flow at Plant 42, $2 billion in losses to scale a line. The strategy hinges on recouping profitability once full-rate production begins on Lot 6. First, supply chain. Going from 7 aircraft per year to 11 strains an industrial base, the Government Accountability Office described in September of 2025 as bottlenecked across aerospace-grade aluminum, semiconductors, and specialized composites. The GAO has warned that nation-state actors are targeting unclassified networks of subcontractors to exfiltrate stealth platform technical data. Second, sole source. Every B-21 is built at one Northrop facility in Palmdale. One earthquake, one fire, one targeted industrial sabotage event could pause the entire long-range strike modernization. STRATCOM Commander Admiral Richard Carell testified to the House Armed Services Committee in March of 2026 that the Pentagon is exploring the feasibility of a second production line. That decision has not been made. Third, the historical pattern. The B-2 Spirit was originally programmed for 132 airframes. Cost growth and post-Cold War budget pressure truncated the buy to 21. The fleet today stands at 19. Every American bomber program of the past 40 years has ended at fewer aircraft than the requirement. The B-21 is engineered to break that pattern through cost discipline as a key performance parameter. But the pattern is the pattern. Fourth, fleet adequacy. The program of record is 100 aircraft. STRATCOM's requirement is 145. A 2026 Mitchell Institute report argued that denying China sanctuary in a Taiwan scenario requires 200 B-21s alongside 300 F-47s. Factor in maintenance, depot overhauls, training, and nuclear deterrence holdback, and a fleet of 100 yields only 30 to 40 mission-ready conventional bombers on any given day. Fifth, the stand-in versus standoff debate. Critics argue money would be better spent on hypersonic missiles and standoff weapons launched from B-52s well outside the threat envelope. The Mitchell Institute counter is direct. Standoff weapons depend on space-based sensor kill chains that are themselves contested, and a self-contained sensor shooter node like the B-21 is more cost-effective against relocatable targets than expending $3 million hypersonics on fleeting opportunities. None of these risks is fatal. All of them are real. On one road, the capacity expansion holds. Lot 6 reaches full-rate production. Northrop returns to profitability. Congress funds STRATCOM's 145 aircraft requirement. A second production line opens, eliminating the single point of failure at Palmdale. By the early 2030s, the Air Force operates between 145 and 200 long-range stealth bombers. The Pacific basing posture is restructured around penetrating range. The geometry shifts. On the other road, the historical pattern wins. Future LRIP lots experience cost creep. Congress caps the buy at the program of record minimum of 100 aircraft. The mission-ready conventional fleet stabilizes at 30 to 40 bombers daily. STRATCOM's requirement remains unmet. The geometry of a Pacific conflict tilts back toward the adversary. Peer adversary bomber programs are not in this race. China's Xi'an H-20, after a decade of development, is functionally frozen. No confirmed test flights. American intelligence assesses domestic Chinese turbofans run hot enough to compromise the H-20's infrared signature. General Stephen Davis of Air Force Global Strike Command has publicly described the PLAAF as a regional bomber force, reliant on the modernized but non-stealthy H-6. Russia's Tupolev PAK-DA was projected to enter serial production in 2027. A late 2025 leak revealed it depends on hydraulic actuators from a Russian firm that itself depends on Taiwanese CNC machine tools blocked by sanctions. PAK-DA deployment now slips into the late 2030s. The program is, functionally, on hold. The window is open. The question is not whether the United States can build a sixth-generation stealth bomber at scale. The question is whether the country has the budget discipline and the political endurance to finish the job before the window closes again.